Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons match review show with myself today. Brighton won, West Ham won. Really frustrating that we didn't come away from that Amex with all 3 points. But that's life. That's how football goes. We've had our chances. We didn't take them. And then we find ourselves at the back end of a controversial VAR decision, which I'm really still confused at the logistics of the laws around it and why Brighton's goal stood for not one, but 2 different offences that happened in the build-up very shortly to their goal. But it's frustrating. We have to take the point. We have to keep moving forward. But ultimately, it's cost us 2 really important points that would have got us out of the relegation zone. But now we find ourselves still in the bottom 3, going into 2 games now with Aston Villa and Manchester City, which are very difficult for West Ham, whilst our opposition have more favourable fixtures during the run-up to Christmas. But we're going to break down everything that happened in the Brighton game, in that 1-1 draw, and see exactly what we got right, exactly what we got wrong towards the end, especially the last 10 minutes. And I think overall, West Ham fans were happy with the performance. I think when we look at the lineups in a second, there were a few different surprises. There was obviously a lot of intensity that went into the Manchester United draw just 3 days before this game. So I completely understand the need or the necessity for changes. But some of them I wouldn't have probably made, or I would have made different changes if I could have picked. But in terms of the style, I think Nuno got it spot on. It really frustrated Brighton. And, they didn't have a shot on target until like the 80th minute. And 4 of their 5 shots on target came after the 86th minute. So it was a really good performance from West Ham. There were obviously a couple of moments where Brighton had some half chances, but we had multiple chances of our own to win and kill the game off, which is also another frustrating element as to why we didn't collect all 3 points. But let's start with the lineups, because there was obviously a real positivity and buzz around the likes of Magassa and Potts after their performance against Manchester United, in particular Magassa. But we switched things up. We went to a back 3. Kilman went into the back 3 with Mavropanos and Todibo. We then had Wan-Bissaka and Diouf stay in the starting 11 as wing-backs. And then the midfield and forward options changed slightly. So in comes Guido Rodriguez to play in a midfield pivot with Fernandes. And in back comes Lucas Paqueta as well. So both Potts and Magassa making way, which again, Magassa's performance was outstanding, but again, he's probably trying to conserve his minutes and not overload him at this point because he hasn't played much football. Paqueta is almost a false 9, and then we had Bowen and Somerville either side. So good to see Somerville back in that side as well. And Callum Wilson probably rightly dropped to the bench because we have to manage his minutes with a lack of striking options we do have, also with Fulkrug departing most likely in January. But I think, to be honest, Nuno's tactics worked really well because of how Brighton like to build up. We nullified their attacking threats. They obviously like to play between the lines and connect and get it wide with crosses in. But to be honest, we negated a lot of that. There were a couple of moments in the first half where we allowed that to happen, and they did have a couple of half chances that we needed to be awake to. But in large, we were pretty good at nullifying what they had, and we did create a couple of chances ourselves going forwards, which we'll get into. But by and large, as I mentioned, Brighton were pretty frustrated by what we were doing and how we were setting up, as mentioned before, lacking shots on target and lacking real impact on the game. But let's look at the stats from the entire game before we break down the sequences that happened. So Brighton, as we're expecting, dominating possession, 68% to our 32. Expected goals of 1.87 to our 1.14. Again, a lot of that coming towards the end of the game. 22 shots to our 14. 4 shots on target for Brighton to our 5. 3 big chances each. 3 big chances missed for West Ham, another crucial element there. 2 for Brighton. And obviously they dominated in terms of passes, accurate passes, and a few more corners as well. But that graphic there doesn't really paint the picture of how the game went, because to be honest, the first 15, 20 minutes, I thought we looked okay. There was clearly a plan from Nuno to get both Somerville and Bowen into those positions as quickly as possible when counter-attacking, because those are the 2 most dangerous attackers we have on the pitch and in the squad. So I really liked how he platforms that with, again, I wouldn't have brought in Guido Rodriguez into that midfield. I think Magassa could have started that game, to be honest, and then you bring him off after 60 minutes if you need to, if he's feeling leggy from the game against Man United. But I just don't think Magassa should have been dropped. I understand the need to conserve minutes, but he's going to have another week's rest after this game. He had to play, especially because of the confidence he would have been feeling from that performance. So I wouldn't have brought Guido in. I thought Guido looked a little bit off the pace, as expected, because of how he plays and also the lack of minutes he's had. So I think that negated a little bit of what we could do in that midfield. And I think Magassa would have brought a better option in there. But I really liked the shape. And this was the shape. And this was what we were looking to do. So the back 5, obviously Diouf's out of picture at the moment. But we started to play almost like this. And we had Fernandes and Guido just sitting in that midfield pivot. We had Paqueta maybe 5-10 yards in front of them, forming that triangle base. And then you had both Bowen and Somerville, who stayed really, really tight inside. They weren't wide. They were playing between those pockets of space between the midfield and Brighton's defenders. And then we were looking to exploit those spaces. So as soon as Lucas Paqueta was getting the ball fed into him, both Bowen and Somerville were on their bike, looking to exploit the space, looking to run in behind. And that was a clear tactic from West Ham. And there were chances or opportunities where we would leave our three centre-backs and either Wan-Bissaka would push up on the overload for Bowen or Juve would do vice versa on the left-hand side. And Fernandes and Guido, they were almost told to just sit in, disrupt, and be that bridge between Paqueta and the rest of the attack. And I really liked this, to be honest, from how Brighton were playing, because as I mentioned before, they like to play in more central zones. They like to build between the lines, and then they like to look to get it out wide and get crosses into the box, into dangerous areas. So the system from Nuno, I think, was very, very good. I think it was a good adaptation of what we needed, going to a back three again. And to be honest, from what we've seen over the course of the season, we haven't been good enough defensively. And this was a good starting point to platform from that. And there was a big call about Lucas Paqueta coming back into that starting 11. And I think if we'd have played a midfield three, I don't think it was warranted putting him in that midfield three if we were going to continue with Magassa, Potts, Fernandes, and Somerville was fit to play on the left-hand side. However, obviously dropping Wilson, it makes sense for Paqueta to come in as that false nine. And I liked Paqueta's performance, to be honest. I know people had mixed opinions, but I thought he was very good in what he was doing. There's obviously limitations to what Paqueta can do in that position. He's not a natural goal scorer. He's not someone that's going to run in behind. But he linked play really, really well. And it allowed both Somerville and Bowen to get the opportunities that they did, which I think is another thing that probably goes unnoticed, but it's important to note as well. So again, we had some really good chances. And the first one again, or the first big chance of that half, obviously Paqueta had a couple from long range. Bowen had one as well. But this was the real big chance before half time. And it comes again from a Brighton mistake, but Paqueta sharp to this. So goal kick, they win the first header. And then it's about how can we react in this position. And one thing Paqueta did really, really well against Brighton was the tenacious work of a midfielder. And even though he wasn't playing in midfield, he was winning his duels. He was winning those battles on a lot of occasions. And he was just being a disruptor to how Brighton wanted to build up in that midfield and not allowing them too much time to do so and getting a bit scrappy when we needed to. And that's exactly what he does here. He reacts first to this. He gets the tackle in. The ball then breaks to Somerville, who again is lightning quick. So he's sharp to this. He reacts really, really well. And he gets in behind Lewis Dunk here with his first touch, which is excellent work from Somerville. And then he finds himself in this position. So again, I've seen online, could he have squared it to Bowen? For me, I think Somerville makes the right decision. And I'm going to show you exactly why that is when I move it forwards a frame. But the pass is really, really difficult to make in this situation. It's hard to see it because of the screenshot. But this is a shooting opportunity for Somerville. It's very difficult for him to pass the ball to Bowen because he'd have to reverse it back. Then Bowen would have to take a touch. And Somerville has worked himself into a really, really good position. And you would want your winger to be shooting from here. If it was Bowen on the other side, I'd want him shooting there. So I think Somerville makes the right decision. And then we have a look at other things that come off of the back of that. And two things to note is, number one, the goalkeeper's position. I think it's definitely... it's scoreable is the best way of putting it. And Somerville just gets it wrong. He shapes his body too wide and he finds himself slipping over and the ball just goes wide of that far post. But in terms of the plan from Somerville, I think it's spot on. He gets himself into a really good position. He's just lacking that clinical confidence in front of goal to put that away. And that was a really big chance for West Ham at a really critical stage in that first half. But frustrating because I'm not going to be critical of Somerville too much because he's such an outlet for West Ham at the moment. And when he doesn't play, it's really, really difficult for West Ham to have that balance. And I think that's a big point. You know, Bowen's drop in performances simultaneously comes when Somerville doesn't play. And the over-dependency on having someone like Jarrod Bowen is almost negated. It just takes a little bit of the attention and pressure off someone like Jarrod Bowen, who had a fantastic game against Brighton, so much better. He was really good against Manchester United as well. But just having Somerville on that other side just gives the opposition something else to think about. And it also gives West Ham another outlet. But he has to be doing better at least. He has to be hitting the target there. He shapes up his body too far and he ends up slipping as a result of it. And we should have found ourselves 1-0 up, but we go into half-time at 0-0. But We came out second half and we continued to play the same way. We continued to play with the same structure, the same setup, and we just looked to platform as much as we could because Brighton were getting a little bit sloppy, which has been a recurring theme of their season at points so far, giving away sloppy opportunities because of how they build up and how they want to play. But there was an opportunity there for West Ham to continue attacking, and that's what we do in the second half. And this is how the chance comes. Again, we can see that box, that 5-box midfield setup with the back three, and then the 2 pivot of Guido and Fernandez on this occasion. And then we're looking at Paqueta in that midfield, and then Somerville and Bowen, who is currently out of shot in this screenshot. And then we look at other opportunities as well. But Paqueta, as I mentioned, doing the really, really good industrial work. He's pressing this. It's a loose touch from the Brighton player. Paqueta's straight on it here. And he wins that ball. He wins that duel, which then gives West Ham the platform to go and attack. And that's exactly what happens. Bowen picks up the ball here. And we know Bowen, as soon as he gets into these positions, his first thought is to be direct, is to get past his player and get into a goal-scoring opportunity as quickly and as effectively as he possibly could. And you can kind of see there where Somerville's going on that left-hand side. It's just giving us another outlet, again, as I mentioned before, to look to see how we can attack that Brighton back line. But Jarrod Bowen takes it on himself. He actually takes on about 3 or 4 players in the process of this screenshot. And then we see the strike across goal, which is saved by the Brighton goalkeeper. And then Somerville is there to almost score. It would have been a really, really good goal. A nice acrobatic attempt. But again, the goalkeeper is there to save it once more. But again, that kind of illustrates we were getting in those moments, and it's coming from the tenacious work that we were doing. And shout out to Fernandez again, man. He was absolutely unbelievable. I think he won 11 out of 11 ground duels was one of the statistics that came out of that game. And he was absolutely everywhere, especially after the effort that he put in to Thursday night against Manchester United. To go and then do that again against Brighton and be that disruptor, he was phenomenal. And he's been really, really good in the last few games for West Ham. And he's really starting to find his feet in a West Ham shirt. And that's the sort of player we need in there. And that's why I think having someone like Magassa alongside him, and Potts as well in particular, who's obviously done well since coming in, is the best way forwards for West Ham. And Lucas Paqueta, as good as he can be, he needs to find his way back into this team, because too often when he's playing in central midfield, he's not impacting the game as he should be. When he plays as a false 9 like this, I actually think that's where he can maximize the game his best, because of his physical nature. He's obviously very good in the air. He can play back to goal. He can link up play when you've got players like Bowen and Somerville either side of him. He just doesn't have the out-and-out natural goal scorer impact that you would want from your striker, which is probably why he doesn't play there as much as he potentially could. If he was someone that could, as you mentioned, someone like Mikel Merino is a great example of a midfielder going into that false 9 position and scoring goals. If Paqueta could add goals to his game in a similar way, he would be a fantastic player for us in that false 9. He just doesn't score enough goals or create enough in terms of the assists. But his link-up play and his final third play, or block between the final third, is actually really, really good. But we continued pressing. I know, obviously, Brighton were pushing us in terms of keeping the ball and trying to probe us back, but we were looking for a threat. And Callum Wilson came on, which I expected to happen because, obviously, we were looking to change things up. We obviously brought in Potts as well into the midfield as our first substitution. But within less than a minute of Callum Wilson coming on, that's where we find our first goal. And again, it comes just from a long clearance up. Kilman deals with his lines. Nothing crazy. We're just defending as we should be. And then it's about second phase. And we talk about the Brighton mistakes and the reluctance to make the right decision at times because of how they're encouraged to play and keep possession of the ball. But Van Hecke makes a really bad decision here. He tries to head it back to Lewis Dunk, who is left as the isolated centre-back, and he gets it wrong. And as I mentioned, Callum Wilson, fresh onto the pitch within a minute, is latching onto it. And then he squares up Lewis Dunk. And obviously, Callum Wilson's an experienced player. He's not going to beat Lewis Dunk for pace at the way he plays. He's not going to take it past him. So he just waits. And Jarrod Bowen, again, we speak about Jarrod Bowen. He's played so much football for West Ham, but yet he still has the energy to bust a gut in this position and wants to get into a goal-scoring opportunity. And Callum Wilson just waits. He buys his time. Jarrod Bowen makes the darting run between centre-backs and the fullback and finds himself in this position. The pass from Callum Wilson isn't actually that good. It forces Jarrod Bowen into a really tight angle. But Jarrod Bowen, I mean, we talk about the instincts of a striker or a natural goal scorer. That's exactly what Bowen does. And somehow on the slide, it's almost like a slide tackle / shot. He managed to get there ahead of the Brighton player. And I think it just takes the goalkeeper by surprise because of how quickly Bowen gets the shot off and the way he shoots in this position. And he just goes past him. And it's a really, really good finish from Jared Bowen. And West Ham find themselves 1-0 up with less than 18 minutes left to play. And it had all the setup of a win. I think Nuno, to this point, had coached a win for West Ham. I think he gave us a platform to work from. We were creating opportunities. Defensively, we were being really, really good. All of Todibo, Kilman, and Mavropanos were winning a lot of their duels, and they were fantastic. It was really, really good performance. There were obviously a couple of moments which I've spoke about with Juve before. He was getting isolated a little bit too much from the wide players of Brighton, in particular Adingra. But that's, again, Juve is young. I'm not going to be too hypercritical of Juve because obviously he needs to be better defensively. But going forward, he obviously gives us an engine and an outlet on that left-hand side. But as I mentioned, I thought we defended really, really well. But that's where I think Nuno made the mistake. And I think he just went too early in terms of the substitutions he brought on, because around 5-10 minutes after this, I think it was in the 82nd minute, we make the subs. We bring Souček on for Paqueta, and we bring Magassa on for Fernandez, and we bring on Sawyers as well in the left-back position, which great to see him make his debut for West Ham at just 18 years old. Fantastic moment for him. So that one was fine because he come on for Juve, but taking off Paqueta and Fernandez, we almost just said to Brighton, look, we're holding on to this now. We don't want to have any attacking threat going forwards. It's just going to be, let's defend and try and pick off Brighton, maybe on a counter-attack if we can with Bowen and Wilson again. But I didn't disagree with Magassa coming on because I thought he should have actually come on for Guido over Potts, to be honest, in the around the half an hour mark when we made that first substitution. But when we took Paqueta and Fernandez off, we just lost a little bit of control there, and we just sat 5-10 yards deeper, and we said, all right, we're going to defend our box and we're going to hold on to this 1-0 win. And it just gave Brighton a little bit more initiative to push forward some players without the threat of, say, a Fernandez or Paqueta linking things. Obviously, Somerville's come off at this point as well because of the minutes we need to manage for him, which is understandable. But it just invited pressure. And as I mentioned, Brighton's shots on target, they had 4 after the 86th minute, which is indicative of that pattern being shown. And it's frustrating because, look, if you want to set up and you want to defend what you've got, fine. But he brought Souček out to that left-hand side, and we became a very flat 5-4-1 where you had Souček, Magassa, Potts, and then Bowen tucking in on the right, forming that 4 in front of the back 5, and then Callum Wilson as the lone striker. And it just made it really, really difficult for West Ham to, A, hold the ball, but B, it was just getting recycled. Every single time it was getting recycled, Brighton were just putting the ball into the box. It was just creating pressure. They had a couple of shots that Areola was saving. And then we go into injury time. I think it was 6 minutes added. And you're just thinking, let's just get through this now. We have to just try and get through this because Brighton are knocking on the door. And as I mentioned, I just don't think those subs were right from Nuno. But annoyingly, how the goal comes out is really, really frustrating because I don't think it should have stood. I think it was very clear at the time that there was an issue, again, with the rule. I don't understand the rules. The rules make no sense to me, which we'll go through. But this is how Brighton's goal comes about. The ball gets recycled out. If I'm being extremely picky, Callum Wilson does not close this ball down well enough. He sort of jogs out, expecting the ball to come in. If he puts him under a little bit more pressure, then maybe this cross isn't allowed to happen. But that's me being super picky. So the ball comes into the box. First issue is this. The overhead kick from the Brighton player, Mavropanos is actually jumping. Mavropanos is off the air at this point to meet the header. So that kind of tells you how high up the Brighton's boot is. So that's the first point is it endangering an opponent? Yes. Should it be a foul? Yes. If Mavropanos goes around on the floor screaming, we get the foul instantly because that's how football now works. You have to go down and scream and roll around on the floor for a referee to take it seriously. So that there should be a foul. If we're talking letter of the law, that's a foul. And that's a free kick to West Ham, but it doesn't happen. Immediately after that, the ball comes into Ruta. It hits his knee or his chest area, and then it bounces up onto his arm, which he uses his arm, which is extended out to control the ball. So him handballing this, accidental or not, has directly impacted this goal. It's allowed this goal to happen. So that, for me, if I'm looking at the rules, that should be the rule. If you've handballed it and it's directly impacted the goal within such a quick time frame and you're using common sense, of course you roll it out. Of course it should be disallowed. But it doesn't because it's technically not the direct phase. And what I mean by that is Ruta has the first shot, which is saved by Areola. So hypothetically, if this goes in and Areola doesn't save it, West Ham get rewarded and the goal gets disallowed, which makes absolutely no sense because look at the time there, 90 minutes, 8 seconds. The ball comes straight back out to Brighton. 2 seconds later, he passes the ball to Ruta inside, the one that handballed it, and he scores from this position 3 seconds after he's handballed it. So how on earth that goal has stood, again, the ruling is so stupid because that shouldn't be the rules. It was the same on Thursday night. Souček got clipped but stayed up, so it wasn't a penalty. If Souček goes down, it's a penalty. So you're getting penalised for being too honest as a football player. And then we talk about, oh, we don't want players diving. They go around too easy. Referees give fouls too easily. They need to start being firmer and give fouls for these positions. Again, that overhead kick, VAR should pick up on that handball and use common sense to know that he's handled it, accidental or not, and it's led to that goal very, very quickly. It should be penalised. It should be penalised. It should be ruled out. But it hasn't been. And then obviously the overhead kick as well, as I mentioned. Look how high up his foot is. Again, this one I'm less annoyed at because clearly Mavropanos isn't hurt from this, and it's sort of grazed his head, which you can see there. So fair play. Again, Mavropanos has just not gone down. If he goes around rolling, then it's a foul. Maybe we need to encourage the dark arts again. I don't know, but that's not really the direction I want football to go in because obviously it's a good attempt from the Brighton player, but it should be a foul. If we're going by letter of the law for the handball, we have to go by letter of law for the overhead kick by endangering a player, by how high up his foot was, and it actually made contact with his head. So you can't have one rule for 1 second and then not apply it to another context, which is in the same sequence. That's where my biggest frustration is with the goal. And really, really frustrating because I mentioned we'd coached a really, really good performance. Nuno in particular coached a really, really good performance from the West Ham players, and we gave a lot into that. I thought all of the players deserved credit for their performance because of how much they put into it. In particular, likes of Jared Bowen, even Somerville. Again, he'll get his criticism, but he was really good when he got the ball. He offered an outlet. He was dangerous. He was linking play really well. Paqueta, again, I thought he had a very good performance too for what he was offering. And players like Fernandes, who have absolutely busted gut, not just in Manchester, but to come into Brighton and do that before being taken off, all for this to be the reward, it just doesn't feel right. And again, this isn't just about that particular moment. This is in the context of West Ham's season. That's 2 massive, massive points dropped because of that situation. And we now still find ourselves in the relegation zone, 2 points adrift of the likes of Leeds and Forest, when, as I mentioned, we've got Aston Villa and Manchester City coming up. It's really, really frustrating because it would have just given us a lot more confidence going into those games and just relieved a little bit of that pressure as well. But those 2 points could be absolutely massive come the end of the window, end of the season. And if that's going to be something that relegates us, that's where I have a really, really big issue because it's just not fair and we shouldn't be penalised by poor officiating, which just seems to happen time and time and time again in the Premier League. And it is crazy that we're now in 2025, 26. We've had VAR for over 5-6 years now, and we're still at a point where they just can't get decisions right. VAR should be black and white. It should be this is a goal or this is not a goal or this is a red card, this is not a red card. And there should be good enough people in those VAR rooms to decide that. So how we're still going around in circles, I'm not too sure, to be honest. It's really frustrating, but it is what it is. We take the point. As I mentioned, massive shout out to the likes of Fernandes, Jared Bowen, who were fantastic. Again, Todibo, really, really good. Mavropanos, fantastic. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, very solid. You know, there were some really, really good performances in that lineup. And as frustrating as it is, we just have to go again. We have to pick ourselves up and go against a really informed Aston Villa team next Sunday who have just beaten Arsenal, find themselves 3 points off the top of the league. So by no means is that an easy fixture for West Ham. But we have to get behind the boys. We have to continue pushing and we have to try and find a way out of the relegation zone because at the moment, as each week passes, we get closer and closer to the end of the season. The likelihood of West Ham becoming a championship club again increases. Just statistically, it increases. I don't think it will happen. I don't want it to happen, of course. I think we have enough quality to stay up. For sure we do. And obviously January is going to be a big moment for Nuno and the board. But we have to go into that January transfer window with something, some positivity. And look, it's not all doom and gloom. We've gone to Old Trafford and Brighton and picked up 2 really valuable points and not lost those games, which are on paper very difficult fixtures and places that West Ham struggle to go to. So it's 2 good points in the balance of the whole season, but that only counts if we win our games that we should win. So getting points against the likes of Brighton and United away is fantastic. But if you don't beat Leeds at home, or if you don't beat Fulham at home, or if you don't beat Forest or Wolves at home, it's all for nothing, because those are the games that you can allow these extra bonus points from. And that's going to make the difference come May 2026 when we're looking at this table. So look, lots of positives to take. I thought we coached it really, really well. Just that final 10 minutes, I just wish Nuno wouldn't make those types of subs. Or if he's going to go a bit more defensive, we still have to have the outlets, because otherwise it just makes it really, really difficult and just encourages teams to pump the ball into the box and create chaos, create panic, which West Ham defenders do not notoriously deal well with. So we take the positives, we move on. We'll obviously be back on the channel for the Aston Villa preview later this week, as we look ahead to a really, really important fixture. But we take the point. Good performance from West Ham. Good couple of points over the last 3 days, and performances as well, given the different team selections we've had and the effort levels that have gone into that. So credit to Nuno for that. We just have to keep looking forwards and hopefully push on now for the rest of the season and the rest of this year going into the January transfer window. But let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts on the 1-1 draw against Brighton? What are your thoughts on that decision right at the end? And who impressed you most from the West Ham team from that game against Brighton? Let me know down below in the comments. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for more content. Until the next one, come on, you Irons.